the record industry has initiated an assault on the black community. You listen to people like Chuck D, others who, I know that I'm talking about some older ones, but others who don't feel that need to promote, gang, drug, and gun culture. I like a nice story like anybody else. I love Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, but there are times when I don't want to listen to things that sound detrimental to our community.
His name is Kai, a black TV anchor, married for 23 years, who says marriage fosters strong black communities. Here's a story. Brother Kai, it is a pleasure. I am honored for the fact that you're actually sitting here with me and doing this interview.
Thank you, 𝐿𝐷𝐿.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me to do this. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful. So I would like to know about your childhood.
My childhood.
What was your childhood like?
My childhood, I wouldn't say that it was vastly different from that of other people. I was born in Washington, D.C. In D.C. I'll share a little fun fact for you, and your viewers can go back and do the math. I won't say the year, but I was born the day the Civil Rights Act was signed in Washington, D.C.
I'm about to look that up.
That's kind of my history. I was raised in Prince George's County, which is a county just south of Baltimore County.
Right.
My parents, my late parents, they have both since passed away, James Jackson and Elaine Jackson.
Sorry to hear that.
I appreciate that. He at that time was a postal worker, and my mother, I think at that time, she stayed home with me, wasn't working. They divorced when I was only 3. So I really have never known my parents in the house together. And as a black man in this country, that has a profound impact on you.
It sure does.
My father was always in my life. He was never an absentee dad. He was a great man. But it does have an impact on a young man when you don't have your dad right there with you every day. And while I love him and miss him tremendously, I'm cognizant of that fact. And of course, I give a lot of credit to my mom for raising me and being there. But my father was there for me too. It's funny, I was talking to my wife one day and I remember, this is a small thing. I was in junior high. I had a science fair project that I had to get done. I was procrastinating. And my father came and picked me up from my mom's house, brought me back to his house, and we worked for hours to build an erector set robot.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that, 𝐿𝐷𝐿. That's the kind of man he was. He was a Christian, a man of faith, a good guy, a deacon in the church. And I think in large part, I am who I am because of my father, my mother, and my other mom, named Charlotte, my father's second wife, because of how they raised me.
That is such a profound way of actually growing up. My next question was going to be, what were your parents married? But I would like to ask you, like, what was one principle or what was one teaching that you took from your father and that you're actually using up to now?
I would say do the right thing. Like Spike Lee's movie.
Right.
Just do what's right. My mother was not terribly religious, where my father was. He was a man of faith. My mother was a non-practicing Catholic, as I like to say.
Okay.
Years ago, I think she was. But she never remarried, and that was okay with her. But both of them instilled in me doing right by others, doing the right thing. They didn't, and even my father, even though he was a man of faith, and I spent a fair amount of time with him and going to church, he didn't lecture to me in that regard. I think he tried to lead by example, and I appreciate that. It is important we talk to our kids. You have kids, young kids, I have children. But I think it's equally important to lead by example.
Absolutely.
Because I've found myself at times being guilty of telling them things
that you're not really doing yourself.
Yes, I'm not necessarily doing myself. And it might be more helpful to show and do as opposed to tell.
Absolutely.
That's my thought.
And that's actually one thing that I talk to my wife about often, as to where, like, I want to paint this picture.
Yes.
For my, for my kids to see. So, the way how I love on her, I want my son to see that picture and say, oh, my dad loved my mother.
Right.
Just like how you have, like how your dad will go to your mom's place, pick you up.
Yes.
It is such a it has such weight, on how people actually, grow up to be,
I
right?
think it does. I think you're
Um,
right. I think you're right indeed.
right. So you've been married. How long have you been married for?
My wife and I've been married 25 years this year. 20, thank you.
Congratulations.
I appreciate that. We got
That is
married in
rare.
1998. Yeah,
1998.
1998.
And how was marriage life like?
It is a challenge. I would tell anybody, and she wouldn't mind me saying that. I'm a movie guy, so I have a degree, an undergraduate degree from college in English to teach. Although I didn't want to teach because I knew wouldn't be a good teacher. That's why I
Right.
got into journalism. And then I had a desire to go back to school around 2006 or seven, and I ended up going to American University and majoring in film, which I'm glad I did. I had a lot of close friends who were film people
Right.
telling me, don't waste your money going to film school. If you want to make films, go out here and make films. Just go and do it directly. And I appreciate that story because I think you can spend a lot of money, and I see it,
Right.
going back to college, getting one more degree, where what really matters is going out in the world and doing what you need to do. You can come up with a
Hands on.
business plan.
Correct.
You don't need to go to college to do that. But here's what I would tell you from my experience. I had a television background from being a journalist, but I didn't have a film background. And there was a lot that film school gave me, particularly in how to operate a business, maintain it,
Correct.
the rules, rights. There are a lot of legal issues that you have to think about when you're making film. And the camaraderie I got was
Correct.
really special. So for me, it was an investment. That's the way I look at it. It wasn't, Iñaki, something that I would say cost me money. But to get back to your point, your question, you asked me about marriage.
Marriage, right.
And what's marriage being like. Since I'm a film person, there's a movie I love called, I think it's Baggage or Baggage Claim.
Baggage claim.
You know which,
Baggage claim.
is that the right movie I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I think it had Paula Patton in it, right?
I firmly believe so.
And the young man who played Antoine Fisher.
Right, right.
In that movie, he said something that really stuck with me. And he said, the secret isn't getting married. The secret and the magic is staying married. And that was one of those moments. And that's why I love film so much, because I love
I
good
forgot
writing.
about that line. I forgot about that line.
Would you agree with that? It's
Absolutely.
It's profound.
Absolutely.
It's work. It's work. And there are times when my wife gets annoyed with me, and I understand that. And I'm not going to say I get annoyed with her, but there are times where I might
don't say
wish
that.
she did something differently than she did. I'll say that. But it's a give and take. It's work. And what you have to realize is marriage is a partnership. And I think it's important for young people, because it's hard to do it when you're young. Because when you're young, you just
Absolutely.
have hopes, dreams, and you should have that. As
Absolutely.
older adults, we want you to have that. But you also need to have vision and think what your marriage looks like when you're 10 years into it, 20 years into it, 25 years into it. And the dynamics to some degree have changed a little bit. That hot and heavy passion that you felt when you first got together isn't quite like it was when you first got together. My father told me it wouldn't be, and he told me the truth.
This is
It's not-
good.
it's-
This is good.
Instagram and posting on Facebook and all of these trips around the world, and that's beautiful. But go ask married couples if that's what their relationships look like. I'm not saying it's not fun and you're not in love with your partner. There's
Right.
plenty of that.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think we should be realistic about how things evolve. We at times sometimes don't want to look down the road because I think sometimes the future is a little scary.
Correct.
Don't let it be scary. Just embrace it. Understand, as a friend of mine, he's a pastor. I like it when he says this, and I know you're a man of faith, and the Bible talks about
Oh,
this.
yeah.
There's a season for things in life, right? There's a season.
Everything under the sun.
Everything has a season in Iñaki. And so there's a season for getting married. There's a season in staying married. And there's a season when we won't be here. And that's okay. But we just need to think about it, embrace it, and then continue to live our lives at this moment.
Brother Kai, that was profound. That was extremely.
And it's come from other people. This isn't just me and my wisdom. It's come from reading. It's come from being in the Bible. It's come from pastors who've ministered and counseled me.
There is this notion where, like, like so many black women in
Yes,
America, especially, are saying that they don't need a man. What's your take on that?
I hear that. And you're talking to a guy who, for all practical purposes, and I said I had my father in my life,
Mhm.
but I was raised by a single black mom. I don't believe that. Do I believe everyone needs to be married? No, not necessarily. But I think what we do when we talk like that is we divide men and women. Those couples
That
who
is
want to
up.
get together, men and women who would theoretically get together. That's what I'm talking about. And
Right.
I respect everybody isn't in necessarily in that framework. So this is nothing against anyone else's life. We need each other. As men,
We do.
we won't survive without women, and our women won't survive without us. And as
That's-
as a black community, we need each other now more than ever.
we sure do.
So I'm not a fan of that, because I think what it does is I think it further works to separate and divide us. Some of those issues and problems are internal, things that we need to work out as men, and we need to be better men, better husbands, better fathers, better
Right.
brothers, better sons. I acknowledge that, better boyfriends. But it's not a one-way street. We all need to do better. You can't just say men need to do better, but there's nothing women need to do to be better people as well. That's not
Brother
balanced.
Kai,
That's
you
not
dropping
balanced.
some jams. Oh my goodness.
So you remember the Million Man March that took place in America? That was in Million Man March was 1995, I want to say.
Not that I
Yeah, we're getting
know
the
of.
time. So it'll be something good to look up. I was at the Million Man March. The Million Man March was an event where black men across the country, some even I think from other countries, descended on Washington to start a dialogue and to do work to be better men, to be stronger leaders in their communities, again, to be better fathers, better brothers, husbands. Some of the march itself in its event was condemned and demeaned because there were people like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was taking
Correct.
part in it, and others. But what I found was this was bigger than any one person. Before social media,
Mm-hmm.
before mobile phones were like they are today, before smartphones,
Right.
men got together and said, let's meet, brothers, let's do better by our families, by our communities, by ourselves. That was a beautiful thing. And I think the march has had a lasting impact in America.
Mhm.
And I think it's going to be something that was revisited. Spike Lee made a movie about it called Get on the Bus. I took a number of pictures. I wish I'd taken some video. I didn't, but I do have
Oh,
pictures. And when I find those pictures, they're somewhere in uh, a box of pictures that I have. If I find
Right.
them, I'm going to share them with you.
Please do.
But the Million Man March had a profound impact on me as a black man, because seeing all of these black men in peace and love together let me know that the message about us and the image of us is a lie. It's not who we are.
I was about to get into that actually, how there's like this image that's actually being portrayed that black fathers aren't necessarily in their kids' lives.
There are always people who don't live up to their responsibilities. That's an individual issue.
Mm-hmm.
Collectively, as black men, we're married. The data shows we're married. We try to be good husbands and fathers. We're not perfect. And many of us are in college or trying to, work in some capacity or start our own businesses.
Correct.
I'm not ignoring any of the problems or issues we have, but I'll tell you what's funny. Ask the people who are the most critical, what things are you willing to do to help black men achieve? And when you start getting silence, you know what you'll find? Those are the people who not only don't want black men to achieve, they're not necessarily anxious to see black men achieve. If you're really interested in solving a problem, one of the things you're doing is going to the people who could use help and asking,
Correct.
how can I be of service?
Correct.
As opposed to spending the majority of your time criticizing. Because most of the black men I know, are fathers, husbands, college educated, business owners, and are good, upstanding members of the community. I'm not hanging out with cats on the street trying to knock me in the head or anything else like that. I mean,
Seriously.
who's doing that? But what we've done is we've allowed a narrative and an image about ourselves and our community to be pervasive. I don't discount the fact that that exists,
Correct.
but it's not by and large who we are. And where we need to improve, I agree. Let's improve.
Right.
But let's roll up our sleeves and see how we can help, not in an arrogant way and not in a way that's condescending towards black men or black women or anybody else, but in a way that's heartfelt and that's sincere. How can I help? How can I be of service? How can we stop the school to prison pipeline? How can we stop young men who want to be out on the corner doing what they do from doing that? You know, but if we don't offer them alternatives,
Right.
that's what's going to happen. Let me say this thing really quickly. I'll let you ask your next question. One of the things that's happened, and I've been guilty of it, man, these kids today, I don't understand them. You know, this stuff they're doing, whatever kids are doing, kids who've been here for 15 years didn't invent the earth. So whatever they're doing, they've learned it from someone. If they're picking up a gun, they've learned it. If they're committing acts of violence on the street, they've learned it. Or in the school, they've learned it. If they're out on the corner selling something they shouldn't be selling, they've learned it. When are we as adults, regardless of race, going to be willing to say we've failed as adults?
Let's take responsibility.
Let's take responsibility. How can we help our children whom we clearly have failed? Not all of them, but some of them.
Correct.
As opposed to just asking what's wrong with these kids. Well, clearly there's something wrong.
Right.
What is it that I didn't do as an adult? You know, and even if I'm not in that kid's family, perhaps there's something I can do to assist so that that kid is better. We can either point fingers and blame for the next 50 or 100 years, or we can roll up our sleeves and start working.
I firmly believe that most of the problem stems from the home, right? And so when the parents aren't present, when the kid has just free reign and no structure in his life, he then tends to take that same behavior out on the street.
Right.
So my next question is basically like television. These kids are looking up all these rappers who are talking about, like just, banging this, ITCH.
Right.
I'm about to pull up and, shoot everybody. So like, as a society, as a black community, like how can we stem from that? Like what can we do to change that whole narrative, what our black brothers rap about?
I think one of the first things to do is to acknowledge that the record industry has initiated an assault on the black community. You listen to people like Chuck D. This culture there's a white executive from the music industry who's been very vocal about this and on YouTube talking about how this culture is perpetuated and fostered within the music industry. First of all, Jay-Z said something funny. I heard him talking to David Letterman. He said if you're starting off rapping, he said most of these young rappers talking about this or that are lying. They haven't done half of the stuff that they're talking about doing. And I don't think it was critique. It was just acknowledging that more than likely it's impossible for you to have done all of this stuff and then all of a sudden now you got a record deal. It's storytelling. So they're basically telling a story, not necessarily true. But from Chuck D's standpoint and others, this has been pushed into our community. This has been heaped upon young men because they clearly have a talent and a skill to spit, to rhyme.
Right.
And so you acknowledge that. But there are plenty of rappers out there, Mos Def, people like Chuck D, others who, I know I'm talking about some older ones, but others who don't feel that need to promote, gang, drug, and gun culture. I like a nice story like anybody else. I love Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, but there are times when I don't want to listen to things that sound detrimental to our community.
And it's actually plaguing our community as well.
No, it is to a great degree. And the key part about it is
Mhm.
black folk aren't the ones primarily making money off of that.
I was
They
about to
aren't. It's
touch on that
people
as
outside of
well.
our community. We're not the
Oh
ones
my
making money.
goodness.
The individual artists may be making some money, but what did Chris Rock say? Shaq may be rich, but the person who signs his check is
It's
wealthy.
richer,
And now
right?
he's obviously not playing anymore, but you understand the point. But the people who are at the top of the music industry are the ones making the real money. We're the ones who have to decide whether we want to be consumers of something
Correct,
that is not in our interest and doesn't align with our values.
correct, correct. Wow.
I can't decide that for somebody, but I think once individuals understand the structure and the
Mhm.
breakdown, they'll make decisions for themselves. I think they will. I'm
Man,
optimistic.
this is the oh
I'm
man,
optimistic. I do.
you just hitting it. I have a lot of friends, right?
Okay.
Young black brothers who are so like terrified of getting married. So right, I was about to get married, and I walked in here actually
Okay.
at the QG, and a couple of like older black men were here, and
Okay.
I had mentioned that I'll be getting married next week at that time. So they started putting this fear in me. Don't do it. It's
They were
like
telling you don't do it.
they were telling me to not get married.
Oh, they
It's like
weren't
the
joking
wrong.
either.
They weren't joking.
And you were
It's
already
like
nervous.
exactly. And so I'm
Oh
like,
man, I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah, that's
it
hard.
was so crazy. I'm like, as a as an older black man, wouldn't you want to encourage me to actually get married and settle down and have kids? And so well, what advice would you give a young gentleman who's looking to get married but is like terrified, afraid of getting married, basically?
Marriage is a beautiful thing, and humbling ourselves to come together to partner with somebody
Mm.
is another beautiful thing. Marriage isn't for everybody, and if one feels like it's not for them, don't get married.
Right.
But there are so many benefits to marriage. One of the best, and to me, two of the most important, aside from having children, because not everybody's able to have children, and I
Right.
acknowledge that, but just fostering stronger black communities.
Mm,
That's what marriage helps do. And
mm.
your marriage may not be that traditional marriage that we've seen. That's
Right.
okay. But I'm
Right.
saying bringing people together helps foster stronger black communities.
It sure does.
And it's good for you health wise. Studies have shown, apparently, this is what I've read, that men live longer when they're married.
Really?
That's what I've seen. You have to get married and find out. Of course, you're married,
Oh
so
my goodness.
you'll find out. But in one way, one person will say, "Well, I guess you're not going to know because if you're married and it's time you die, you don't know
Right.
whether you would have lived longer if you were single or not."
Right.
I think I'll take this risk. I like it.
I will too.
I I like the idea of sharing my life with someone, having children with my wife, two beautiful daughters. It's a wonderful thing, and what you'll find is, again, you don't have to be married, but if your goal or idea is I want to travel the world and see this and do that, then go do those things. If
Absolutely.
you somehow or another think you're not going to be able to do them, so you can say, okay, I did them, and then find that special person for you. But you can do all of those things and still be married. Marriage is a wonderful thing,
It
and I
sure is.
encourage it. Here's a bigger thing: we're not going to outsmart nature and humanity.
Hmm.
These things have been in place. And I'm not talking about things that foster abuse or oppression of people, but things that foster the procreation of humanity. They
Amen.
exist.
Amen.
They
They sure
exist,
do.
and they're going to exist after we're gone.
Long before we're gone.
Yeah.
Long
So
after, rather.
yeah, I think that's okay. I encourage marriage. Not, but I do also encourage that couples talk to each other and get counseling prior to marriage. You might find marriage is not for you.
Right.
And if it's not, then don't get married. But I think it's a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing.
It sure is. So I talked to you earlier about the fact that it's so easy for people to get a divorce. And in Africa, we find that like extremely detrimental, to like either side of the families. If somebody's looking to get divorced, what advice would you actually give them to actually deviate their mind from that act?
I would ask them if they've considered counseling,
Mm-hmm.
if there is an opportunity for counseling to perhaps save the marriage. Outside of a spouse or both spouses abusing each other,
Mm-hmm.
if it's possible to save the marriage, I think that's helpful. I've heard people in this country, which I think would be an interesting concept, say it should be, because divorce is so easy. I've heard a number of people saying it should be harder to get married in the first place. In other words, that you would have to go through more hurdles to get married. Their belief is it would encourage more people to stay married. I don't know. That's just one thought. But
Wow.
it's interesting because
I've
it's,
never quite
isn't that interesting?
ever looked at it that
Yeah,
way.
and neither had I until I heard that. It's
Wow.
because it is fairly easy to get divorced. Okay.
All right. So I want to transition into your time in college,
Okay.
right?
Yes. Do you know where I went to school?
AI, you said?
South Carolina State
South
in
Carolina State.
Orangeburg, South Carolina. Go Bulldogs.
Go,
Go
Go
Bulldogs.
You lost a friend.
I did.
How was that like?
It was horrible. Her name was Joyce Austin. Joyce and I went to high school together in Prince George's County.
Oh,
And me, Joyce, and a couple of other people ended up going to college together in South Carolina, all from Maryland. And I'm still in touch with them today. Not all of us are as close as we were, but we're still in touch.
Right.
Joyce and I had graduated from South Carolina State in '87. In the following year, I went to Montgomery, Alabama, and she was at Clemson University in South Carolina in graduate school. There was a fire, an apartment fire, where she lived as a graduate student, and everyone got out of the apartment in time but her. They flew her to Charleston, and at that time I was living in Montgomery, Alabama. But they flew her to Charleston because there was a very good medical center that handled burn patients. But she passed away, and from smoke inhalation is what we were told.
Sorry to hear that.
I
man.
appreciate that. It was devastating. I tell people when Joyce died, it was at that moment I realized I was not invincible and that one day I would die too. When you're in your 20s, as we were at that time, we were 23, you 23, almost 24, you have a bit of a feeling of invincibility,
Right.
like you're going to live forever. And it was a reminder that I am not.
Mm.
And I am going to honor Joyce with a book that will bear her name, that will kind of use my daughter's sensibilities and personalities in it, but it will be a book that I honor Joyce by using her name. I think of her often. She was actually, while we graduated high school at the same year, in college the same year, she was actually a year younger than me. But I wonder to this day what her life would be like, whether she would have had children, how she would have been with my children, because I know she would have been like an aunt to my children. Joyce was my sister, and I miss her tremendously, but I'll never forget her. She was a wonderful person.
Sorry to hear that.
I loved her. Loved her.
At what point in time did you know that you wanted to become a news anchor?
That's a great question. It wasn't until my senior year in college that I knew I wanted to get into television. Because initially, I was thinking about being a teacher. A woman named Zerbino Sandifer, who was a news anchor in Columbia, South Carolina, 40 miles northwest of where I went to college,
Right.
came to speak to our radio club, WSSB Radio, South Carolina State. I was so impressed by her and this talk about television. I asked her at the end of her presentation if it would be possible for me to do an internship at her station. She followed up, I followed up. We got the dean of the English department to work it out, so I would not only go do the internship with her, but I got college credit for it. And I worked with her for 6 months. So I always tell people my start in TV was actually in 1986, even though I didn't graduate until the following year. And I count 1986 as my starting year in TV because I was going out with photographers, helping them on stories. Now, I wasn't shooting video, but I was writing stories back in the newsroom. And Sabina was like a big sister to me. So today, she's out of the business, and she is in Texas, teaching at in Houston, actually teaching at one of the historically black colleges there.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, she's still my big sister, and she's incredibly proud of me, and I'm honored that she's proud of me. And I've done everything I can to, as a journalist, let's just talk about journalism, to be the kind of journalist I know she would want me to be. Honest. I don't take favors of any kind from anybody, any business, no payola, no kickbacks for doing something on the side. I'm big in ethics. Somebody who tells stories honestly, and someone who tells stories, particularly about our community, with compassion and empathy and with understanding.
That's what we need. Of
the uniqueness of the Black community and the Black experience. So my plan is to go to Houston this year and speak to Sabino's students at some point. So she and I have to work this out. When I do, I'll make sure I take pictures, maybe get some video and send that to you.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Please do. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it.
You would love her.
So let's kind of wrap this up.
Yeah.
What do you love most about your job?
That I learn something every day, and I truly do, and then I can share it with other people. Never from a point of ego. Like, hey, 𝐿𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬𝐿, I know this. Do you know that? No. 𝐿𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬𝐿, do you know what I just found out? Did you hear about this? You might tell me, I did. Kai, did you know this? No, I didn't know that. A good journalist is always listening. Always listening, taking in information, always recognizing and cognizant that somebody knows more than you.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked me, we've been hosting a lot of town halls at my station, Fox 45 TV, which is where I work here in Baltimore. And I was paid a compliment that I had done a good job for the town hall. And I said, thank you. And they said, wow, how do you do that, juggle all of that? And I told the person, my goal is to kind of be like the captain of the plane, the captain of the ship. But my goal isn't to let people know, because I don't think I am, my goal is to try and impress people to show them I'm smart. Right. That's not my goal. My goal is to let the people who are there to talk, who are smarter than me, talk. And where I see a need to maybe interject a question, like you're interviewing me, right, I'll do that. Where I see a need to bring up a point of history, maybe that somebody missed, I'll do that. But never to say, oh, wow, Kai Jackson knows a lot. No, actually, I don't.
Right.
And I'm constantly trying
God knows a lot.
God knows a lot.
God knows all things.
All-knowing, omniscient, omnipresent. I'm always trying to learn more. That's my goal. So what makes a good journalist is somebody willing to listen and learn. That's the advice I would give about just being in television. What's the expression? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can do what?
We can listen
more than we what? Than we talk.
Yep. Right. So you're a big man of faith.
Yes.
What has God done in your life that is so profound that your mind can't really comprehend with it?
Giving me life every day and helping me through the death of loved ones. Oh. As you get older,
that's where we need strength.
I have a mentor, a good friend of my karate instructor is a man named 𝐁𝐢𝐿𝐴𝐚, who I love dearly like a father. He'll be, God willing, he's 90 right now, and he'll be 91 in March. Still teaches karate. He's a vegetarian. He is the picture of health. He is a kind of man that 𝐿𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬𝐿 would see in Africa. Somebody living that long, who lives a healthy life. Right. He's here in America, so we treasure him. We don't have a lot. We have some, but we don't have a lot of Black men who are 90 years old, approaching 91 in this country.
It's rare.
I hope that God gives me the kind of wisdom Mr. Amin has and the kind of ability to endure, because as we age, we lose people we love, and it can be overwhelming. What keeps you going, I believe, is faith. Faith in knowing, first of all, and I had to come to terms with this recently because my wife lost her father before Christmas.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This is part of the life cycle.
It truly is. It's inevitable.
Do we not think that our parents weren't in pain over losing their parents, over losing a sibling, over losing a spouse, over losing a cousin, not in pain over losing a friend?
Mm.
So if we're mindful of that this is the part of life, and don't be fearful of death, but understand it's a part of the life cycle, I think that I thank God for getting me through that, because it can be absolutely overwhelming, paralyzing. And it's been something I've had to come to terms with, but I'm thankful, very thankful, that I continue to pray every day.
Mm.
And one of the things I do most is pray for others, mindful that someone else is often going through something much more difficult than whatever I think I'm going through.
Right.
I try to be, as a friend of mine, Pastor Alan Cork, love him dearly, is a good friend. I love his word. He uses the word mindful. I want to be mindful of others, mindful of you and your family in Iyake, mindful of my new brother that I met here tonight. Be mindful of others. And I think if we do that, it humbles us.
It sure does.
And it helps us see, not only see God, but see God working every day. You know? So
wow.
That's my thought.
All right. What is your favorite Bible verse?
I think my favorite Bible verse comes from Psalms, which is, "What is man that thou art mindful of him?" Mm-hmm. So you're asking God basically, who am I that thou art mindful of me? And how does the song go? His eye is on the sparrow, so I know he's watching me.
Right.
I think that's beautiful. If you ever think about us in relationship to the universe, the stars,
right?
We're this. I'm not saying we're unimportant, but I think it is important to understand our relationship to everything else, because it humbles us.
It sure does.
That's all. That's all I'm saying. I think humility goes a long way.
It sure, absolutely. What advice would you give to a young black man in Baltimore? Any final words, any advice that you'll give to a young black man who's on the street, who think that they don't have the opportunity, or they're not, like actually smart enough to get the job that they want? What advice would you give them?
I would tell those young black men, young black women, you are smart enough. You are here for a reason. God has a purpose for you. And all you have to do is look around you to see the wonderful history of others like you who have accomplished. You are the descendants of proud people from the continent of Africa. You perhaps are the descendants, at many instances, of kings and queens in Africa. You are here for a reason. God has a purpose for you. Look around and find others who are doing what you want to do. Seek them out, could be me, and ask them, how do I do that too? It's possible. It's been done, and it will continue to be done. But you're here for a reason, and you are going to achieve. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right.
Our young men and women in this city are going to achieve, and I'm confident of that. They've been doing it, and they're going to continue to do it.
Absolutely, Brother Kai.
Yep.
Thank you for your time. I greatly and truly appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Brother Iyake. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you for this opportunity.
Woo!
This has been great.
That was good.